Hey, welcome to a long-awaited Behind the Jersey podcast. Uh, it's been a while, a long while, and actually we were talking. We're going to try to get on at least every couple weeks or every 3 weeks, so we can bring you some more stories about behind the jersey that we've accumulated over the years, and in our coaches' corner, and some upcoming events. So this week is one of the biggest events for us as coaches and for our athletes, and it's the Whiskey Off Road. So this is the Whiskey Off Road edition. And so the jersey, it doesn't have a podium number on it or anything. It's just got 50 miles of Prescott gravel all over it. So this is the jersey that I'm bringing up for everyone to see. This is the jersey that I wore at the first time that I did the Whiskey Off Road. Um, so we'll be talking about that. First, I'd like to have our co-hosts here, Chad and Jeff, say a quick hello.
Hi everyone. I'm glad to be back, even though it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. Happy to be here on Whiskey Week here in Prescott.
Yeah, Jeff, you're calling in or on the call straight from Prescott. How's it looking there in town? Is everybody getting ready?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of people from out of town here. The course is running really good this year. I think it's going to be a very fast whiskey, and the weather looks like it's going to be superb. Little bit of wind, great temperatures.
Yeah, I was super excited to see the forecast at 67, I think, on Saturday race day, and that's right in our wheelhouse. We're driving down on Thursday here from Gunnison, Colorado, and I was super worried with the temperatures y'all had in January and February that it was going to be one of the hottest years, but it's looking really good.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great day.
Well, awesome. Jeff, do you want to give us a kind of a course preview of what the whiskey has to offer us this year?
Yeah, so the 50 kind of is going to stay the standard. The big climb up Copper Basin Road, the Moby or 48 choice. They have done a little bit of work on the Moby option, making it a little more smooth. Um, the 260, which got a revamp a couple years ago, is now really worn in well, and it's going to be super fast, super fast. Climb out of Copper Canyon, still kind of the same climb out of Copper Canyon. It doesn't change a lot. A big X factor this year, and I have not been down there in down the road, but the road had gotten really washed out down to Skull Valley. Rumor has it they might have graded it in the past week, but I don't know that for sure. So that descent down into Skull Valley could be a little precarious this year, even if they grade it, because it'll be dry and there'll be some loose rock. Once you get back up out of there, you're heading over down the West Spruce Ridge Trail. Same on that. It's kind of a legacy trail with some of the more technical bits in it. Parker Canyon, always fast and flowy. And then through the White Rock feed zone, and then you make your way over to Manual Pines, which hasn't changed much, just fast and flowy in the trees, and it's all good. But the big news is the 30. The 30's getting a little bit of a change, and it's still the big climb up Copper Basin, but instead of heading over to the Sierra Prieta Lookout, you're going to make kind of almost a U-turn and head back down Copper Basin Road for about a third of a mile and make a left-hand turn on a new trail called the West Spruce Connector. The transition from the dirt road onto the trail is going to be a big pinch point because it kind of goes through a ditch and straight up a quick little wall. And there are no optional lines. Everybody's going to have to do that. So that's going to make it really interesting. And then you're on a slight climb with some pretty sharp switchbacks right off the bat. So, I think the 30 milers need to look out for it's going to back up a little bit. And then at a point, they have an option to either go down what's called the Sparrow Trail, which has recently been put into the National Forest Inventory, or make their way over to the traditional course, which is the 9401 Trail. Sparrow is, we used it as an enduro stage. It's got some technical bits in it down toward the bottom. And then the 9401 is what it's, what the whiskey's always been, with the big waterfall dumping down onto, what's that called? Cold Creek or Potts Creek. I can't remember. But anyway, so there's a little bit of option there. Everybody's saying the 9401 is faster, but I think that also plays into everybody's skill level. But and then the rest of that course also seems to be holding up well and running pretty fast. So that's what I got for the trail.
Nice. I'm looking forward to it. But except for the part of in the feed zone in the 30 milers coming down at us at a pretty good clip, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so we'll have to, in order to get to the feed zone, I think the road's going to be closed further down. So yeah, I'm not sure how they're going to approach that, but it would almost make sense that the road is totally closed. So where we usually feed right there, they're going to be turning and going down the hill. So yeah, some changes there. I think it's going to make the 30 a lot more enjoyable race for everybody. I think they're going to have a lot of fun. And, the 50 is the 50 with the big descent and the big climb.
Oh, that's awesome. I know Todd Sadal, who's the director of the race, he's never been afraid to innovate and change things up, and the course and or the race course has changed many times throughout the years. It's kind of been settled the way it is now for the past few years, but it's good to see some more changes, and maybe one of these days ultimately we'll see 50 miles of single track.
Yes, that, and keep hearing the rumor of what that might be, and it would be a heck of a ride, that's for sure. A heck of a ride.
It's not only a great race, but it's in a great location. If you haven't been there, Prescott's at about 5,200 feet. I think it's a mile high, and it's just it's famous for its Whiskey Row, and you got downtown, and then the event, Epic Rides, they bring in a full slate of entertainment and bands, and it's just fun for the whole family, and I enjoy it. We go every year as a TENAC. We always put on a little pre-ride on Friday for some of our athletes, and then we help support the athletes on Saturday, and it's by far, we as a group of coaches, it's by far our biggest one-day race that we have racers at. I think this year we have around 22 athletes racing, and so it's it's one of our biggest events. I love going to it. I love the race in general, and it's just overall vibe of the whole weekend is fun. One, I did race the jersey I brought up. I raced the single speed category, and it is a big race for single speeders. And do either of y'all know any more on that? I know a lot of single speeders come from all over just to do this event. It's a big challenge.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of single speeders, and I'm not sure what the draw is, because for me, I and Chad, you'd probably agree, but climbing for over an hour on a single speed, not my idea of fun. But
and then you got no gears on the descent. It's like,
right. Mm-hmm.
So you can halfway enjoy the descent, not even fully enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's a hard day.
The beauty of a single speed, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'd ask both of you, I just said that this is our biggest race for our athletes, or the biggest biggest number of athletes we have going to one day. I mean, what makes this a great goal event for, is it the challenge? Is it the format? Is it just the experience? What do y'all think draws people to this race?
I think it's a good challenge. It's a solid day, but it's not quite as demanding as like a Leadville. But when you finish it, you feel like you accomplished something because it's a demanding event. Like I was looking back at one of my athletes' files just right now, and over 300 TSS day, over 4.5 hours. That's a big day that you have to put in some quality training to accomplish well. So I think it's a nice event to have on the schedule and something to build towards.
Yeah. I think a lot of people like it because it's iconic. They're racing with a lot of people, the starts are mass starts. So they're at some point you're kind of racing against people of your own abilities. And they just, yeah, I mean, it's a whole weekend. There's a lot going on. And, you just feel like you're, like Chad said, you've really accomplished something pretty stellar once you're done with it.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I use it, if I for a lot of Leadville athletes, if they're looking to do Leadville, this is a great kind of test event, because it is a huge challenge, like you're saying, and you get to practice everything. I mean, you have to be on with your nutrition, you have to be on pacing, and it's got a little altitude, it's got a lot of people, and then plus, a lot of top pros are there with the prize list, and it's just a tradition for pro riders to be there, and they do the fat tire crit, so you get to watch them and be up close and chat with them. It's not a World Cup or anything, but you can get right up at close to the pro riders. Which brings me to the next thing is it's kind of lacking in pro riders this year. What were the numbers you were saying, Jeff?
I think the women, there's about 13, and the men couldn't be much over 30 at the most. Real opportunity for, some of the pros who haven't been on the podium before to get up there.
Yeah, I mean that's the way I would look at it. I know that there's some conflicting events out there with World Cup mountain biking and gravel and fondos, and which is in the big picture that's great for cycling that there's so many events out there, but it does create a huge opportunity with the prize list for maybe some pros you haven't heard so much about that are going to be on the podium or winning, or they take advantage of the day and come away with a big paycheck, and it in a lot of ways what you could earn being on the podium at the whiskey would be more than what you're earning from any of your sponsors for the year. So
And it's 5K to win.
I believe so, yeah.
Pretty solid, and it pays pretty deep too. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's pretty solid.
so I think it's going to be exciting to see who takes advantage and really uses this as an opportunity to shine and maybe have a breakthrough, a breakthrough race, a breakthrough event. So
In the big picture, this one could be much more exciting than others, because you might not have somebody just ride away from the beginning. It could be a very tight race, and like you said, somebody's going to have a breakthrough ride.
so exciting stuff. I mean, when I worked with CZ Racing, this was one of our biggest events of the year. I mean, it was a big focus, and we would go through the power files and break down what it was going to take to win, and it was always fun. Even going there and doing some pre rides with those guys, and I know a couple of those riders are going to be there this weekend, so I'm looking for them to hopefully they take up the opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this jersey again. In case you missed it, well, you can barely see it, I guess. I need to get a better way to present these jerseys, but this is the Drunk Cyclist jersey, which was or is, I don't know if it is anymore, was a website run by a good friend of mine, and he sponsored us for a few years in cyclocross, and we had a cyclocross team, and we raced we raced mainly in Colorado, but we raced, some of the national series and things like that. But I, in 2014 is when I started Tenac, and so and I went there. That year, uh, they were giving away a trip to the single speed world championships. And it wasn't if you won, it was just you got put in a lottery, if you're one of the finishers of the event. And I would say that that was one of the things, and it was just something new for me. I'd done a couple of single speed races earlier in the season, and and so I had decided to do the whiskey off road, and I actually went there, 2 weeks before the event to kind of test some gears to see if what I had picked would be the correct gear, and I felt pretty good. I didn't ride the whole course, but I rode most of it, and I felt all right with that. And I chose a pretty. It was smaller than what I had been running. I've been running like a 2-to-1, and I ended up running a 3217 uh, on a hardtail mountain bike, a Voodoo bike. That was one of our sponsors, and yeah, as races do, and that year, we would get around. I forget the name of that church camp, but we would kind of go through the church camp, and then
Camps.
we would get on single track right away. Um, and it was a huge bottleneck, so it was kind of a race to the single track. Um, and you have that really steep section uh, after that stop sign before you get to the gravel road, and I mean, the gear I have is pretty big, so I got up the hill pretty fast. So I think I was in the top 10, going into the single track. Uh, and then as we moved over and we were climbing up the water bars, I quickly realized that the gear I had was too big. Um, and it was not going to be pretty climbing out of Skull Valley. So but I kept going. I sat in in the group all right. I wasn't in the lead group of the amateur race or anything, but I wasn't far behind them for sure. Um, and then I started to climb out of Skull Valley, and it basically was standing up for an hour. It
When
was
you got to Valley, where were you in the single speed group?
Oh, I was in the lead at that point. I don't even know where second place was, and I was in the top 10 of the overall
Nice.
at that point. Um, and then I just knew that it was going to be torture.
Did you
Like
have a good idea of who your top competitors were there?
I had no idea. Like what Jeff was saying earlier. I mean, it's a mass start. You're just starting with a huge amount of people, and I was relatively new to the single speed scene, and so I wasn't aware of who was on single speed or who wasn't, or who was fast or who wasn't. I was just there to put in a huge effort, and it's a big challenge to uh, to ride a single speed at this race.
Yeah. Yeah, so how'd Skull Valley go for you?
It was a struggle, and I just kept, I had, you know, my wife and two young kids were there, and especially my son he was about 8, I think, 7 or 8, and I wanted to get off and walk, but at the same time I just didn't want to disappoint them, and so I really dug deep, and I used them to motivate me to just keep going, and I knew I just needed to get to the top because at that in those years, once you got to Sierra Prieta, it was pretty much downhill. I mean, you had Cramp Hill, but there wasn't much else. So, I just knew I needed to get to there at that point, and so yeah, I made it up there and just drove hard and kept grinding at that 30 RPMs or whatever it was, and uh, and yeah, able to come home with the win. So I have a great picture out there somewhere because I forget who gave it to me, but some guy ran up to me right before the podium ceremony with a big disco ball helmet and asked me to wear it. And so I wore that on the podium. And then a lot of the drunk cyclist crew were pretty surprised, when I came across the line in first place. So it was a big party afterwards for sure.
Nice, nice. What year was that?
I I don't remember awesomely, but I think it was 2014.
Nice.
My memory's going these years.
It's over 10 years ago. It's tough to remember things far back.
Yeah, it was one of the hardest races in my career. But I definitely remember it. I think that was the last time I ever rode a single speed too.
That's funny.
Well, we got through my piece, my little race history there. I mean, do y'all have any suggestions, or where you should start, or I know it's a big mass start like we were saying. Is there anything from the course that y'all think that people should pay attention to?
Personally, I think it's important, depending on what wave you're at and things like that. But maybe burn a few matches to stay with a group to get up Copper Basin, and then you sometimes it won't leave you isolated. Um, it seems like the climb out of Skull Valley, of course, is kind of, as we discussed earlier, a bit of a mental game. And uh, I had a really good time up Skull Valley last year because I was actually riding with somebody I train with, and it turned in, I had to, by talking to them and just being there and uh, working with each other, and had a great climb up out of Skull Valley. But yeah, I guess the big thing to me is I tell everybody I think it's kind of worth it to be in a group going into the single track initially.
And do you feel like you know, it does, before you get to the single track, that it does break up into groups pretty well, or is it just one long string getting into that single track? Or
I think personally, I think it breaks up. I think you see lead groups as many as 10 to 15 riders, and then you start seeing gaps by the time once they're on the dirt, and there's that short pitch on the dirt by Camp Stein, right past Camp Stein there that you were talking about, and it kind of breaks up, but you know you still there's still groups, but they're not it's not a big line. Now I think once you get into the single track, that's where you start seeing the lines.
and my experience with all that is just being patient. If you're not if you feel like you can go faster, you just kind of, enjoy where you're at and be present, and try to stay alert of things that are going on around you. But it's not a huge factor to be passing unless somebody's really falling off the group, and then it's just asking, "Hey, can I get around you?" But if you're being relaxed on the single track, whether you're climbing or descending, you're just saving energy and storing it for when you do climb out of Skull Valley.
Yep.
Um,
I think if somebody allows themselves to be stressed out about the 260 descent, that gets real bad, because if you can conserve a lot of energy if you just relax and let that downhill come to you. Um, it's technical enough, but it's not extended periods of technicality. You're hitting these sections off and on, and you've got to be you know really on your A game every for 10 seconds, and then it's back to just, okay, it's really, really fast and flowy, and just relax and take it all in. If you get a chance, there's awesome views at that point too. if you look quick.
well, Chad, what do you think on nutrition? I mean, this race for most people is going to be in that 4 to 6 hour range. I mean, that's where you're starting to push where you can't mess up your nutrition you can't fake it anymore. I mean,
Yeah,
less than 3 hours, you can kind of get by if you make some mistakes, but when you get in that 4 to 6 hour range, it can be tough.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's somewhat dependent on the athlete and how many watts they're putting out, what they're averaging, how much they're going to be needing to take in. But most of my athletes, I'm recommending around that. If it's 4+ hours of hard riding, racing, 80 to 90 grams of carbs typically. And then, when it's hot, like that's climb out of Skull Valley. If it's exposed and it's hot, if you got the sun on you, if you can get ice or, ice sock on the jersey, or making sure you're staying on top of hydration, because if you're getting dehydrated at elevation in the heat, it's going to make a rough last 30% of the race. So, yeah, it's all the components that are adding up to a good race, and nutrition's a key one at this race.
Yeah, like, I mean, I tell everybody just to go in with a plan, and that plan probably won't happen perfectly, but I would plan out your nutrition, as far as what you're going to eat, when you're going to eat it, how much, when you're going to take bottles from people. I was just talking to a woman that I coach, and she's traveling to the whiskey this weekend from California, and it's like, she's going to carry a 2 liter pack, hydration pack, and then have a bottle. Um, and we figured that that's going to get her to us at the aid station there at the four-way. Um, and then I'm going to switch, she has another hydration pack. She's just going to stop. We're going to switch it and then send her on her way. And, she's carrying all her carbohydrates in her hydration pack. Just she's going to drink it all. And, that's what works for her. And then she has a couple extra gels, as a just in case. But it's a simple plan. I have another junior athlete doing the 25, and I had her write down her plan, and she, yeah, it was simple. Like, I'm going to have 6 gels in my pocket, and two of them, and then 2 packs of gummies. And I was like, okay, well, let's add all that up. How many calories is it? And she was about 70, you know, per hour. So that's perfect. That's what she normally does, and her race is going to be a little less than 3 hours. So it's setting it up. But whatever you're doing, I think it's whatever event or whoever you are, it's just starting with a plan and then working from there. Jeff, do you have any like gear, equipment things? I mean, you live there. I mean, and you work in a bike shop, so you have any tires? I just saw a 32-inch Aspen Air mullet setup win the downhill at the Sea Otter. And so, is there anything special that you're seeing that maybe is a good setup people aren't thinking about?
The only everybody's pretty tried and true with the Maxxis Recon race. This year, I've seen a few more people going to the Aspen on the rear tire. Also seen a few more photographs of flat tires. I personally last year jumped on the bandwagon with the Continental Debutals, and they're significantly lighter than any of the Maxxis offerings. But they really seem to be a rider style dependent tire. So I found they work great for me. I've had them for well over a year. I raced the Breck Epic on them. I raced the Whiskey on them. I've had one flat in knock on wood in probably 16 or no 13 months now with them. I've talked to another rider who's sliced 3 of them in the period of about 8 weeks. So I think the rider's style plays into them, but I find that Continental, the people who are embracing it and have a pretty good grasp on their handling skills and stuff, the Continental has been a very good option. But other than those tires, there's not a lot of other things. Everybody's always searching for traction in Prescott, and to a point it doesn't exist. And I feel like that Dub and Tall has created a little better, a little more predictable turning capacity, and it's got great straight line braking, which I think you kind of give away when you go to the Aspen. It's a great tire. The Aspen rolls fast, but then when you need to brake hard, there's not a lot of purchase on that trail. The Dubbental has that purchase. Everybody's got their style and their favorite thing. With people coming in from all over, I'd say the Maxxis tires probably the one thing that most folks have, but I haven't seen any secret weapons. We've seen no 32s as of yet. So yeah, it's just a matter of time, I guess. But pretty straightforward cross country setup is the way to go.
And I mean, once you get onto the second half of the course, does it get pretty chunky over there, or is it, like you said earlier, is it riding pretty fast? Or
It's riding pretty fast. I mean, there's not a lot of chunk at all. The 260 has some sections, and those sections are even better than they've been in the past. And then once you get down off the West Spruce Ridge, that ridge has several sections that are, what we call legacy Prescott, just the really rough stuff. We used it even in the 80s at the Battle of the Butte, if you remember that race.
yeah.
But once you leave the West Spruce Ridge and get on Parker Canyon, everything is pretty fast. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's sniper rocks everywhere, but overall, it's pretty fast and flowy.
Nice. Well, you got your bike set up and your nutrition and, all this stuff. But, the other thing I think about on this race, because it is 4 to 6 hours, is the mental side of it. And we briefly touched upon this, you with that long climb coming out of Skull Valley. And not only that, but, now as the race course has changed, it used to be just straight downhill and it's like all fun just to the finish. And now, you get over there on the second half of the course and, it takes a lot of focus. It's a lot of tight single track. It's technical, like you were saying. And there are some short, steep climbs in there. It makes it hard. I mean, Chad, what would you talk with riders on managing some of those low points, especially, maybe if you're struggling in those last, 10 or 15 miles, maybe you haven't eaten enough or maybe even just the climb. I mean, it gets steeper. Skull Valley gets steeper as you go up pretty much.
Yeah. Well, I think, it starts well before the race and kind of what you're envisioning the event is going to be for you. My biggest mistake ever when I was racing was underestimating either my competition or the course. So I think going into it mentally prepped for a big challenge is the best way to do it. Knowing it's going to be hard, but you're going to be able to accomplish it. And then I would always kind of approach it like I'm going to do battle with the course. It's like I'm going to attack the course. I'm going to put in my best effort and race the course the best I can. So I think, knowing, studying the route, studying the course, knowing what to expect and when to expect it, and knowing it's going to be challenging, but doable. You can accomplish it and get through it. And then trying to maintain either neutral or positive internal dialogue during the event. So instead of looking for reasons why it's hard and why it sucks in the moment, look for reasons why you're embracing that challenge. And, it makes it that much sweeter once you accomplish it. So if it's warm, just accepting it's warm and doing everything you can to optimize your potential on the day with hydration, nutrition, and not labeling anything as negative. So it's just temperature. It's not bad temperature. So I think all those little things add up on the day, but that internal dialogue can go a long way, especially in a long race. I think it becomes exponentially more important the deeper you get into a race.
Yeah, and I was saying, like you were saying before even the race starts, I mean, your mental training is just like your physical training. It's something you want to practice. I don't think if you haven't practiced it, I would still encourage you to do some positive self-talk and things during the race. It'll help you. But you'll be better at it if you practice that. And the only thing I would add is, just being prepared to, with your pacing, and that's partially mental because you got all these people around you, you got adrenaline going, and you have to remember that this is 50 miles. It's a long day, and if you burn some matches early, I mean, I know Jeff was talking about it is worth it to burn a few matches, but don't burn too much.
Don't
You
light the
don't,
fire.
yeah. So you 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 may get to a point where you consciously have to just hold back. I mean, if you get to a point where you can't talk anymore and you're just breathing so hard, you need to really start and say, why am I doing this? And there could be a perfectly good reason, and I'm not saying that you should slow down when that happens, but you do need to say, all right, this is really hard, how long can I sustain this? And and I experienced that firsthand. The other time I did the whiskey, it's another story, but at the very beginning, I started the race and I was supposed to be there to help somebody, a teammate. But we started so fast, and then in the first 3 or 4 miles, I mean, he was up there pushing the pace, but I just got to a point where I couldn't hold that pace, or I was not comfortable holding that pace anymore, and I was like, I got to back off, and I ultimately backed off, and then I had one of probably the best day I ever had on a bike, and maybe we'll come back to that because it's a different jersey, but um, um, do y'all, talking about other stories out there, do y'all have any other stories from athletes come from you, like memorable moments or breakthroughs, blow ups, or what they learned, or anything like that?
From the whiskey specific.
Yeah,
So uh, Trish Thomas, she is one of my athletes. She did it back in 2023. She had a solid day, and yeah, ended up winning the women's open 50. And I think she had a hard time in the heat. She's coming from Boulder. It's not quite as hot at the same time of the year. So, or sorry, Durango. If she's listening, she might not like I mentioned Boulder, but yeah, Durango. Coming from Durango, it's a little cooler there than Prescott, probably. Yeah, it had a little bit of a rough patch in the heat, but pushed through, mentally endured, and had a great ride on the day. So I think it is. It's just one of those courses that can really test you, and you got to be mentally and physically prepped to endure it.
yeah. I mean, if we wrote down a list of all our athlete accomplishments at this event, and I'm not just talking about podium accomplishments, but just having great days on a bike, it's a long list. I mean, it includes like Rose Grant and Chloe Woodruff, and thinking back, one of my most memorable athlete finishes is from Fernando Riveros, and he had targeted this race early, and we examined just about every portion of it, and you know we knew that the climb was the most important part out of Skull Valley for the pro field, and so that's where the race was going to be won, and you just wanted to be with that lead group when you got down there to the turnaround or near it. And so we had even talked, and we put um, a 32 on his bike, which may sound normal, but in a pro field, I bet you Keegan's probably running a 36 or something, or even bigger. But so he had a relatively small gear, but the reason we had done that is we wanted him, with a really high cadence going uh, up Skull Valley, and so when he came out Skull Valley, he was with the world champion at the time, Christophe Saucer. And it was just those two off the front. And, there was a couple other riders, Todd Wells, and I forget the other rider that wasn't too far behind him. But, at that point, all they had was the downhill left. Um, and, he had such a small gear. He just wasn't able to. That allowed Todd and the other rider to bridge back up to them. I think they were over a minute back, but they bridged back up to him to make a group of four. And, at that point, having a small gear was not ideal. So Fernando, he had one of his best days on the bike that day, but he ended up fourth out of out of the sprint, and I think Todd won, and but it was awesome to see him put all those pieces together, and then unfortunately, just the gear choice and the way the race came together, it didn't end up for a win for him, but it still ended up for one of his. It was a break at that time. It was a breakthrough performance. He wasn't racing for CZ or anything. He was just um, he was on a smaller team at that point. So that was one of my best memories for sure. Well, I mean, what does it look like, as far as supporting athletes on race day? I know that Jeff and I have done this before many times, but do what's the toughest part about being in a feed zone, Jeff?
Wishing you're out on the course. Once you get past that, I find it's not. I don't see it as tough. I think it's a bit challenging to ID everybody, but I really enjoy being out there and just kind of seeing how people's days are unfolding. And yeah, I think we're gonna have a handful of folks that were changing their vests for them, and yeah, it's gonna be um, challenging by numbers, I should say. That's probably the big challenge.
Yeah, I think I would agree. It actually goes by pretty fast, after the first rider comes through, and you know, you're doing time gaps and counting, and or that's what I find myself doing, and but I think IDing riders, because we do work with riders, all over, and so we don't get to see them in person hardly ever. And some of them we will meet for the first time, on Friday or Saturday, maybe even Saturday morning before the race, grab their bottles and say, "All right, we'll see you up there." And then we got to remember, what they look like, and they have to remember us, and who gets what bottle, and I'd say that that's that's the that's the hardest part on there on the on the feed zone. But the other thing that comes to mind is just post race debriefs, because with us having 22 athletes there, you know not all of them are going to have their best day.
Right.
So it can be bittersweet a lot of times, where you're congratulating athletes, on having the ride of their life, or just executing their plan, or whatever it is. And then on the other side, athletes that had mechanicals, or maybe just, it just didn't happen for them on that day. And so that can be hard as a coach, going from, the high highs to the low lows.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think one other challenge we're going to have is getting all of that feed up the hill, because we won't be able to drive up there.
You know, I think it was 3 years ago. There's a good picture of me. I have this huge duffel bag, and I had it on my chest with all these bottles in it, and then I had a backpack full more of bottles, and I made it up the hill. I got there and I fed everybody, but my back hurt for weeks after that. So yeah, we have a challenge ahead of us, but if there's two of us, it should be a lot easier for sure.
And 22, that's a lot in the feed zone. Yeah, that's a lot of people.
Well, I mean, the whiskey, it's a great event. I mean, is there, it's kind of a community event. It kind of brings, at least everybody from Arizona, and then you're getting people from the Southwest, and then just people from everywhere, where they get to come enjoy some of the Arizona sunshine, and actually pretty mountainous terrain, and awesome single track, and you have the bands and everything. It's just, it's just a fun weekend. But I mean, if is there a particular type of rider that this race is kind of aimed for? If you're a newer rider, is there, can you just do it from 8 weeks out, or do you have any suggestions for people maybe looking to do the whiskey?
Yeah.
8 weeks would be a pretty short time to prep for. It depends on where their starting point is, but yeah, that'd be big hurdle to jump over for this race. I think, you know, it all depends on where their starting point is, but they've got different distances. So maybe not the 50, but maybe you're going to the 15 or 30 if it's your first race. But it's a quality event. And I think, if you're an endurance mountain bike racer, this is an event that should definitely be on the schedule at least once. That's a good one.
I think it's kind of cool. We've seen here at the shop and just living here, you've seen a progression of some of the younger riders that started by, all right, I'm going to attempt the 15. And now they're racing the 30 or racing the 50, and watch how they've progressed over the years. I'm always a little bit bummed when I see people, though, kind of just stick with the 30 and not challenge themselves to do that 50. Because I do feel like Chad just said, it's something you really want to, if you are an endurance racer, it's something you definitely want to put on your list and get it checked off at some point during your riding career, because it is a challenge.
Oh, for sure. And I agree with Chad. I think 8 weeks is a little short to get ready. Maybe for the 15 if you wanted to do that, but and that is a great place to start. But I do think, yeah, you want to kind of keep challenging yourself, and I have a couple of younger riders that are doing the 25, and then now I have a younger rider. She's gonna go for the 50 this year. It's probably one of her biggest rides ever. So it's incredible to see that, and just to go out and can I do this? I mean, that's what this type of event is, and and at the same time you're doing it with all these other people, including some of the top pros in the nation, and actually world in some instances, and you can all talk about it. You can all talk about parts of the course or climbing out Skull Valley, because you all do the same thing, and you can relate to each other that way. And um, so it's a great event from that perspective. And I do think if I was going to say what works the best, I think if you're in Arizona and you do if you do El Tour de Tucson or something like that, you take a week off and kind of recover from getting ready for that. That's about the time where I would start getting ready for the whiskey, and I'd probably do the 24-hour race along the way as a kind of a preamble, or maybe even some of the MBAA events. Kind of stair step your way up. You kind of have a big goal and set these smaller goals underneath it. So, um, and then from a logistical standpoint, registration does fill up pretty quick, and you want to make sure you get registered. And then if you are planning to hotel it or Airbnb it or something like that, finding out where you're going to stay. I got we had an Airbnb we got going in January for the Western team, and then 2 weeks ago they canceled on us. Like a massive heart attack or something from the guy that was renting it, which super unfortunate. But Airbnb was awesome about it. They got us a new place of similar size right away, and it was incredible. I was surprised that I thought at first I thought, oh man, how are we even going to find a place in our budget? And then they helped us get a place right away. So, but you got that. You got dropping off your gear if you pre-ride the course. You got working on your strategy, parking, that can be a hard place. I mean, there's a lot of logistics involved, and you can, even if you're not racing, just going there to watch and kind of seeing what happens. I think that gives you a lot of, if you're thinking about doing it, I think going there and watching is a really good idea, because you'll learn a lot about the race. And I would just, I mean, like you're saying, you get excited just watching. You want to be there in it. And you see people of all different parts of the world, all different shapes and sizes, and it's like, oh wow, this is an event for everybody.
Definitely. Definitely.
Well, I think that's about all I have to say on the whiskey. Do y'all have anything else?
I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah.
I know I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody listening. And if you have any questions, you reach out to us at go10act.com. We're going to be back here in the next few weeks. I think we're going to move the conversation to Italy because Chad and I are headed to Italy next month for a camp. We're going to Chad's old training grounds in Lucca, Italy. And I think that would be a good topic. The Giro will be going on by that time. And so, Chad, maybe look for a jersey you have. I have some ideas if you don't have one, and we'll be going in that direction.
Nice.
Sounds good.
All right. Good night, guys, and thank you for joining me this evening.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.